Okay, so welcome. Thank you for your time this evening. I know you've all worked hard especially these last few weeks, but it's been great to be able to have some sessions with most of you to talk about how you're improving your project, and obviously to make it this far in the competition is wonderful. And I hope that all of you can make it to the next part and join us on the ISEF team. But one of the things I was asked to do by Faisal is we were thinking about topics, and I wanted to present something different because you've heard a lot of things from a lot of people in the past month about regular presentation skills or improving your content and all these things. But I thought he suggested do something a presentation on how to highlight the strongest parts of your research, and I thought that was very interesting because I've been going to ISEF and judging at ISEF for 20 years now, 21 years now, well, except for the COVID thing, but before that 21 years. And I've taken lots of notes from my interviews with students, and I've asked other judges about interviews with students. So I've kind of have a notebook, one of these lab journal things where we write down notes on ISEF and what's important and how things are, what things to do and what things not to do. So I thought it was really good presentation, or a really good presentation to have with you all at this point, because you're getting close to IBDA, and hopefully you look at ISEF and the team, but it's a really good concept to go over through what's really important in the strongest research parts. And how do you highlight those during your presentation? So I want to start off again. You've seen this a million times probably. I think they just sent out a notice as well, a little booklet on the schedule for IBDA. But I wanted to share it with you again, just so a quick reminder of the criteria that you'll be judged on at IBDA. The research question, the methodology, the data analysis, the creativity, the poster, and the interview. And judges will have, just to let you know, judges will have their phone with them, and on that phone they'll have an app that they'll be scoring you from. So after they talk to you, you'll see them playing with their phone. They'll score you on each of the criteria you see here. It will not be the final score. We tell the judges to go back and think about the project some more, as they take breaks. And so they may say, okay, we give Abdullah a 91.5 or 91. I can't do 0.5, 91. And they may go back and say, well, I've interviewed some other students. I went back and looked at Abdullah's poster. I think his procedures are pretty good, and I think I should give him a 9 instead of an 8 in procedures and give him another point to 92. So they do change things as they go along, and as they think about your project. So I wanted to remind you of the judging criteria. And I think one of the biggest things as far as the research parts and highlighting them is the whole thing is about guiding the judges. And those students that do the best at ISEF and IBDA, they really guide the judges. And there's 3 areas where they can do that. And it's the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I've listed the ones here that I think are the key points here. In the beginning is the first impression and knowing your audience. Those first 2 bullet points are the beginning, right? You have to make a great first impression. You will see the judges will see your poster, so you'll make an impression that way. So we've been in their sessions talking about how to make a great poster, how to make the sections flow together, and how to make it make sense as a story in your poster. And so that's going to be your first impression written, but your first impression when you talk to them is your hook, right? So that's really got to be practiced. It's got to be on point. It's got to really gather their interest or gain their interest. And the other part of it is knowing your audience. And a lot of students have been asking me, who's my judges? Do you have my judges list? Are they in chemistry if I'm in chemistry category? Are they in materials? So you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're talking to. And a lot of times I'm telling students that stay general, don't get too detailed in your introduction, or you're going to lose the judge, even if they're in your category are in your field of expertise. Just be very careful and start out in general terms, and you can get more detailed when they ask questions. So that's the first part as far as the introduction. The second one is the body of your presentation, which is the data, right? So you want to drive the judge to the most important data. What are your most important graphs and why? Is it on efficiency on a solar cell? Is it on killing the cancer cells, the kidney cancer cells, but not being toxic to the normal cells? What's your most important feature and your most important data based on what your purpose of your project is? And then, of course, there's the last part. It's the ending, right? And it's the ending of the story. It's the dramatic part. And at ISEF and IBDA, it's about your impact and what this really means in the real world. So those are the three most, and I want to delve into each one of those by making I think there's 5 points here on the 5 strongest research parts that I think you can make in your project. And the first one in the beginning is novelty. That is the most important thing. You get 20 points for it, right? Out of 100. And so you want to do that by, number one, relating the problem and the hook, which is important, as we said, to make that first impression. You want to talk about the problem in 2 ways. And we've talked about this in our sessions. Number one is you want to give the big picture. It's energy. We have these fossil fuels, for example, and we want to make it more renewable resources. And then you talk about the problem in the current research or the current previous publications. So what's being done out there to solve this problem in renewable energy? Is it solar cells? And what's the problem with solar cells? Why aren't they as efficient? Or why aren't they more efficient? So you go into the problem of your actual area, and then you describe your purpose. Well, I'm using perovskite as a material because perovskite is so-and-so, and we're looking for more efficiency. But clearly, during that time and during that thing, set it all up to clearly deliver the novelty of your work. I can't tell you how important that is. And a lot of times we talk about the hook, and I'm not hearing the novelty in these sessions. I'm not hearing the originality. It's so important to make sure the judges understand that, because there's an old adage, an old saying, you got to tell someone 3 times, right, before they capture it in their mind and understand it. So the more you mention this novelty in the beginning here, if you can talk about it in the middle section, the novel material, the novel procedure, and then at the end, again, my project turned out to be a very good result, and the novelty was shown in this way. So that's a big thing. That's the first biggest, strongest research part that we have is the novelty. The second is work ethic. And what I mean by that is how hard you've worked on your project. And I think the judges should know this. And if you look at where this can be put in, it's when you're looking at your procedures, remember the number of trials or the number of versions or how hard you had to work to make your machine learning algorithm be more accurate. How many times did you try it and get to your accuracy number? So there's different ways, of course, depending on your category of how you can do that, but make sure you let them know how many trials you did and how many versions you used in your prototyping or in your machine learning. Show pictures of you in the lab or workplace. Someone even today, they showed me a video, and she showed me a video of her in her lab working away. And so that's especially important for those of you that have done work at KAUST, at SRSI, or KFUPM, because a lot of the judges, as you know, they have this mindset. Oh, he or she worked at KAUST. They had a lot of the work given to them, or they had such an advantage. Well, show them you worked in the lab and you did those experiments, and you have a lab journal. Give the judges the time frame. Hey, I started at SRSI in August, or I started at KFUPM in September. I went into the lab every day, or I talked to my mentor once a week. It's important. It's very important that you let the judges know how much time you worked on this, because it impresses them and it gives them the presence or the presence or the perception. Sorry, the perception that you've done a lot of work on this, which you have. So I think it's important to show the work ethic in your research. Strongest research part number 3 is key data. It shouldn't be data, it should be data. We talked a lot in these sessions about organizing your data in graphs. Label and refer to the figures. That's a little technique that you can use that's very important, is that you're talking to the judges and you say, as you see in figure 3, or as you see in figure 4, this shows the PCE of the solar cells, or this shows where the algorithm is most effective. So make sure you refer to the figures. It's a good technique and it shows the judges that you're paying attention. Describe why the data is important to the overall work, okay? When you show the efficiency of something, or you show how the supercapacitors work, or whatever it is, show why it's important overall to your purpose. And then summarize them in the results section. That's such an important thing. We talked about the results, the bullet points, and how you can show it the key data in there. The other reason to have a good results section is when the judge sees your poster the night before, excuse me, they're going to want to quickly summarize things, and they're going to want to make it, you want to make it easier for them to see the summarization, and so they can ask intelligent questions and know that you have relevant data. Part number 4, future work. We've talked about this in every session. Show your short-term work, your reason for that, your time frame, and your location. Can it be done before ISEF? That's what I keep asking students, because that's going to show the judge you have this much of work to do. You can do it, get it done in April or May timeframe, and you have the supplies and the equipment to do it. The long-term work, reason, and time frame are important as well. And make strong inferences, okay, that you can get this work done, and the reason to do this work will help you show better data. It'll help you get closer towards your application. And that's the last part, is the research impact. And this is where you really make the big wow factor. And a lot of students have been asking me about that. What's the wow factor? How can I impress the judges with this? And how can I show them the biggest, part of my work? And so I think this is where we want to show the biggest potential aspect of everything you've done. You've done all this work, and where can this lead to? One of the ways to do that is bring the judge into the real world. If you're in medicine and health, bringing them to a clinician setting, when the doctor is looking for a diagnosis, it can be done a lot faster by using this machine learning algorithm. Or instead of in the emergency room, ICU beds are being taken up very quickly. Well, right now they're doing a checklist. The doctors are doing a checklist. It takes a long time to do a checklist. Well, my algorithm will help this reduce time and be able to organize the ICU beds a lot quicker. So bring them as much as you can into the real world, and tell them to explain the situation, or if you have a model, a 3D model, or something that a sample of what you have done so far, it really brings them to reality. And that's the important thing for these judges to understand. It's not just a project. You've spent time in the lab and you haven't got all the way there. You haven't got all the data done. There's still future works, but here's the potential of what's going to happen. And describe the potential benefit. This could lead to lower cost or greener solution, more environmentally friendly. And if you have a cost analysis or an environmental analysis, you can show that at the end. But this really is especially the key at ISEF, and you see the top winners every year at ISEF. It's something that it makes a real world, or it could make a real world impact. So very important part of your strongest research areas. And remember the intangibles. Okay, so we talk about all that. Those are, a lot of that's very, physical. You've got the lab work you've done, you've got the data, but these are the intangibles of your project, and these are the most important ones at ISEF. And this is the actual worksheet that you and I will go through. Hopefully, if you're on the ISEF team, we'll go through this every couple of weeks, because we'll look at the component of what a intangible is, which means like, what's the perception? It's not a physical thing, it's the perception and the overall concepts. We'll go through the ISEF standard, what it means to be ISEF standard in this component, and then we'll see where you are. How are you doing? We'll assess you. Okay, here's where your project is. Here's where you need to change to make it standard, and here's the due date. So some of these I'll go through all these, but they're very important. First impressions, right? We talked about that earlier. Student enthusiasm, eye contact. How are we doing in that? Project design, the header, the title, is it colorful? Is it organized? And our projects, you know, our posters will be perfect for ISEF, that's for sure. So we shouldn't have any problems with that. Project cycle, does everything flow? We talked about the flow of the project. Does everything from the purpose to the procedures, to the data, and to the ending impact, does it all make sense? Is it all logical? Is there a personal interest? Do you show the judges the reason you chose the project, and you show the interest as you're talking about it? You can tell when students have interest in their project and they like what they're doing and how much they've been in the lab and the time they've spent working on their data and working on their experimentation. Terminology, do you take your time to pronounce the terms correctly? Do you answer the questions thoroughly? Do you answer the questions honestly? If you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. So make sure you're okay on everything with the terminology. Critical thinking. A lot of times we test this as judges at IBDA and ISEF. We can say, hey, based on what you know, where do you think this project is going? Or where do you think this experiment could go? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's critical thinking though. So how logically do you get from point A to point B? Project marketing is more, we talked about that in the workshop. Do you have your logbook with you? Do you have a project binder? Do you have a model of what you've done, a 3D model, or do you have the actual sample? Do you have a research paper? And Dr. Danielle talked about this at the workshop, how are you selling your project? It's all about selling. I do that all the time when I go to, I have presentations I make at universities, or I do lectures, or if I'm in a research center, if I'm trying to get money from a grant. I have all sorts of things I show. I have videos of my patients in a clinic in Somalia, for example, or Nigeria, and what they're going through, and how we've worked with them. So I bring them into the real world by showing my actual patients. So be creative, think about this, brainstorm. I know one of the best and funnest parts of our sessions so far has been to brainstorm on these type of things, of how you can make your project look better and how you can sell it better to the judges. Training time, obviously you're going to practice your presentation and work on how your hook's going to go and everything else. So I know you'll practice. And then presentation skills. And you've heard about, obviously you've been trained on these many times and heard a lot of people talk about presentation skills. So just practice and use those presentation skills in your work. So that's my pitch for today. That's my presentation. I thought, again, to take a more unique approach to that and just give what I've seen, give you what I've seen in the past 20 years for ISEF, and of course with IBDA projects the past 10 years, what I've seen the best projects, not that they won, some of them did, most of them did win, but not even winning projects, just taking facets or parts of great presentations and great interviews, and what makes that and how you can highlight that in your work a week from today, and then hopefully 3 months from this week when you go to ISEF, hopefully. So are there any questions, any comments, any recommendations? Love to hear from you, and I'll turn it over to Faisal now.
First of all, thank you so much, Dr.Mark, for the presentation. It has been very comprehensive, and I personally benefited a lot, and I'm quite certain that everyone here took the benefit. I would like to ask you a question. Do you have some advices that the students should have them into consideration before presenting their project to the judges? Some stuff that they should consider, and some tips that could make their presentation much comprehensive and much expressive.
Obviously, I think that first one is and the key to this whole thing I mentioned in the last slide I showed you is practice. Nothing can ever replace practice. There's just nothing else is even close that I can think of in the years that I've been doing this. If I see a student that's presenting, I see students that present to themselves. They're walking around the exhibit hall at ISEF and they're just talking, they're presenting themselves in front of a mirror. And it's all about, you've probably heard this from other presenters about doing it, about practice, but the more you practice, the better you know your material, the more confident you become. Practice drives everything else. Practice drives everything else. It drives knowing your work. It drives confidence. It drives answering the questions. Nothing to replace. So number one, without a doubt, by far, is practice. Number two is really getting that hook, and it has to do with practice too, but getting that hook down into something that really is a wow factor for those judges. We've been looking at using statistics. We've talked about using statistics. We've talked about a personal situation we may have had, but make it something really that is maybe even creative, but it actually makes the judges think, wow, that's a great thing. I want to learn more about this project. So the hook is obviously a critical thing. The third thing is a lot of students have said, I know you're also intelligent. You're some of the brightest students I've ever known. And so when you're that smart and you want to tell, you kind of want to tell everything because you want to tell the judges everything and sometimes what that happens is in the procedures, and especially in the procedures, you want to go through every little piece of detail, and what happens is it's a problem because you get bogged down into the minutia. You get bogged down into the small things that you don't have time to say or aren't that important for the judges to hear. So just think about it and summarize as much as you can. Summarize the procedure. Still try to make the recipe and tell the steps, but let the board do the talking on that. Let the board do the talking on the procedures. Get to that data, because sometimes you spend so much time in the procedures, it's 10 minutes is over and that's all you've done. So just take your time to think about how you're going to do that and summarize the procedures and get to your most important data. And then again, as we said in the slides, make sure you get to the point where you can talk about your impact and how you can provide, as we said in the workshop, the value add, whether you do is it the cost or the environmental comparison or those type of things you're modeling. How can you differentiate yourselves versus the other projects that you've done. So I think those are kind of the tips that I have for you. I think that the ones, the projects that I've seen also, this is kind of another intangible. The projects that I've seen have done well at both are not the students. Some students you can tell they're memorizing things and they just say their script. The students that I see that are the best at these situations, the interviews, are the ones that just make it a conversation. It's not a presentation. It's more of a conversation with the judge. And I've seen so many who do that well, where we're just talking. It's like today, we're just talking with each other, or in the sessions, we're just talking together. And that's how you want to make it feel. You want to make it feel like bring me into your lab and we're just having a conversation on your project. And I know that's a little bit difficult to do. It takes a lot of practice to get that, but the more comfortable you are, again, the more you practice, the more comfortable you are with your content and with how you're presenting. So when you're doing a one-on-one like this, and I told you all, it's not going to be like Central Fair. It's going to be like a one-on-one presentation with each judge. Just make it a conversation. You're both there. He's there to learn. He or she is there to learn. You're there to give the information. That's one little thing. It's a little thing, but the technique is incredible. That if you can make it more more casual, more of a conversation, less of a stand up. I'm giving my Nobel Prize speech. It just makes that a big difference. And by the way, if anyone wins the Nobel Prize, you better invite me to your speech in Sweden. That's all I got to say for giving you this presentation. That's my fee.